Hello, and welcome to Sleep Geography. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. This is your peaceful space, your quiet corner of the world where the day's worries can gently fade away like morning mist over still water. Before we begin our journey, take a moment to settle in. Perhaps you're already tucked beneath warm covers, or maybe you're finding your comfortable position now. Adjust your pillow just right. Let your shoulders drop and soften. Take one deep, calming breath, and as you release it, feel yourself sinking a little deeper into comfort. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from tonight. If you feel like sharing, leave a gentle comment below. It's always wonderful to imagine all the different places where people are drifting off to peaceful sleep, connected by these quiet journeys we take together. Tonight, our minds will wander across an ancient island wrapped in soft grey light, where time moves differently. We'll drift over rolling green hills that seem to breathe with centuries of stories, past villages where church bells have marked the hours for 1,000 years, through landscapes painted in every shade of green imaginable, all beneath skies that know the gentle art of rain and the quiet beauty of morning fog. If you enjoy these peaceful travels, consider subscribing to join our gentle community of dreamers and wanderers. Now close your eyes if you haven't already, and let's begin our journey to England. You are floating high above the Atlantic, where the vast grey-blue waters meet the approaching edge of land. The first thing you notice is how green everything is below you. Not just one green, but hundreds of different shades, from the deep emerald of ancient forests to the pale jade of new spring grass, all quilted together in an endless patchwork that seems to have been lovingly stitched by time itself. There are the blue-greens of winter wheat, the yellow-greens of rapeseed fields not yet in bloom, the grey-greens of sage and lavender in cottage gardens, each shade telling its own story of soil and season, of human cultivation and wild growth. As you drift closer, descending through layers of soft white cloud, England reveals itself slowly, almost shyly, like a secret being whispered. The clouds here are different from other places. They hang lower, move more gently, creating a ceiling of pearl grey silk that filters the sunlight into something altogether more tender, more forgiving than the harsh brightness you might find elsewhere. These clouds have texture and weight, some thick as wool, others thin as gauze, constantly reshaping themselves in slow, hypnotic transformations that make the sky feel alive and dreaming. You feel yourself sinking through this gentle grey light, and as you do, the landscape below becomes clearer. The Cotswolds stretch out beneath you, rolling hills that rise and fall like the breathing of someone deep in peaceful sleep. Each hill flows into the next with such natural grace that you cannot tell where one ends and another begins. They are covered in a tapestry of fields, some bright with young wheat, others dark with freshly turned earth, and many simply carpeted in grass so green it seems to glow with its own soft light. The soil itself varies from field to field. The rich red earth of Devon visible to the west, the dark peaty soils of the Somerset levels, the chalk downs of Wiltshire showing white where the plough has cut deep. Between the fields, you notice the small copses and spinneys, islands of woodland that have survived the centuries of agriculture. Each one is a small wilderness, dense with undergrowth, mysterious with shadow. Some are perfectly round, others irregular, shaped by the contours of the land or the whims of long-dead landowners. In autumn, these copses blaze with colour. The gold of oak, the copper of beech, the persistent green of holly and yew. Even now you can sense their seasonal memories held in the bark and roots. The hedgerows catch your attention now, those ancient boundaries that divide the land into its familiar patchwork. From up here, they look like dark green veins running through the body of the countryside. But you know that each one is a small wilderness, a tangle of hawthorn and blackthorn, elder and hazel, providing shelter for countless small creatures. Some of these hedgerows have been here for 1,000 years or more, planted by Saxon farmers whose names are long forgotten, but whose mark on the land remains, gentle and enduring. You can see how they follow the curves of the land, never quite straight, full of small kinks and bends where they've accommodated a large oak or skirted a boggy patch. In the thicker, older hedgerows you can make out the standard trees that were left to grow tall, the ash and oak that provided timber, while the hedge provided shelter and boundaries. Stone walls accompany the hedgerows in places, especially as your view drifts northward toward the Yorkshire Dales. These walls are different from hedgerows. They are the colour of the earth itself, built from limestone and millstone grit pulled from the very hills they cross. Each stone was placed by hand, fitted without mortar, held in place by nothing more than skill and the patient understanding of how stone wants to rest against stone. They run up impossible slopes and along windswept ridges, testament to the quiet determination of generations who shaped this landscape one stone at a time. The stones themselves are covered in lacins, orange and yellow, grey and white, some so ancient they've become part of the stone itself, a living patina that speaks of centuries of clean air and patient growth. You notice how these walls change character as they age. The newest are sharp-edged and regular, but the old ones have settled into the landscape, their stones rounded by weather, gaps appearing where sheep have pushed through, quickly repaired with whatever stone came to hand. Some walls have stone stiles built into them, worn smooth by countless hands and feet, the stone dipped and polished like marble where generations have passed over. The light continues to enchant you. It is not the golden light of Mediterranean lands, nor the crystal clarity of mountain regions. This is a light that has passed through moisture and mist, been softened by clouds and gentled by rain. It makes everything appear as though seen through a thin veil of dreams. Colours are muted, but somehow richer for it. The greens deeper, the greys more nuanced, the browns warmer. Even the shadows here are gentle, never harsh or sharp-edged, but soft and forgiving, like the shadows in a Constable painting. You notice how this light changes the colour of stone. The honey-coloured Cotswold limestone glowing warm even on grey days, the darker millstone grit of the Peak District absorbing light like a sponge, the flint of the eastern counties catching what little brightness there is and holding it in its glassy depths. The atmosphere itself seems to have substance here, as though the air is thicker with history and memory. You can see it in the way distant hills fade to blue, each ridge lighter than the one before until the farthest mountains are mere suggestions against the sky. This aerial perspective, perfected by landscape painters, is not just a trick of distance but a quality of the air itself, heavy with moisture, rich with the breath of growing things. You notice how the mist gathers in the valleys, pooling like milk in the low places between the hills. It moves so slowly it seems almost alive, breathing in and out with a rhythm too slow for ordinary perception. In some valleys, church spires rise through this mist, like markers of human faith piercing through the veil between earth and sky. The mist clings to rivers too, the Thames, the Severn, the Suce, following their ancient courses as they wind through the countryside, carrying the morning fog with them like a travelling companion. Where the rivers run through water meadows, the mist spreads out, creating ghostly lakes that exist only in the early morning, vanishing as the weak sun climbs higher. As you continue to descend, new details emerge from the landscape. You see how the fields are not uniform but each slightly different, some perfectly rectangular, imposed on the land during the enclosures, others following older patterns, shaped by medieval ploughing or even earlier Bronze Age boundaries. In some fields, you can make out the faint lines of ridge and furrow, the corrugated pattern left by centuries of ploughing with oxen, now preserved beneath permanent pasture like the memory of labour written in the earth itself. These ridges catch the light differently, creating subtle patterns visible only from above or in the slanting light of early morning or late evening. The villages appear now, nestled in valleys or perched on gentle rises, each one a cluster of honey-coloured stone or red brick, topped with roofs of slate or thatch. From this height they look like natural growths, as though they sprouted from the earth itself rather than being built upon it. The churches stand at their hearts, their towers square and solid, built to last not just centuries but millennia. Around them, the houses gather like children around a grandmother, connected by lanes so narrow and winding they seem to have been made by wandering sheep, rather than planned by human minds. You can see the village greens, worn bare in places by centuries of cricket and feats, surrounded by houses that have watched the same families come and go for generations. The gardens are visible too, each one a small paradise of order and abundance. Kitchen gardens with their neat rows of vegetables, cottage gardens overflowing with flowers in careful chaos, the formal gardens of manor houses with their box hedges and gravel paths. Even from this height you can sense the love lavished on these small plots, the particularly English passion for growing things, for creating beauty in small spaces. You sense the age of this place in a way that goes beyond mere observation. It is in the very air, thick with the exhalations of countless generations. Every field has been walked by 1,000 years of farmers. Every stream has been crossed by Romans and Saxons, Normans and Tudors. The very hedgerows remember when wolves still roamed these hills, when great forests covered much of what is now open field, when the first humans arrived and began their long conversation with this land. You can see the ancient tracks that predate any road, the ridgeway, the Icknield way, paths that follow the high ground, worn by feet and hooves over millennia until they've become part of the earth itself. The scent reaches you now, carried on a breeze so gentle it barely disturbs the leaves. It is the smell of England, rain on stone, wet earth, grass and growing things with undertones of wood smoke from cottage chimneys and the faint sweetness of flowering hedgerows. It is a green smell, if green can be a scent, fresh and ancient at the same time, like opening a book whose pages have absorbed centuries of careful reading. There's the sharp tang of wild garlic in the woods, the honey scent of meadow sweet by the streams, the earthy richness of ploughed fields after rain, all mingling into something that could exist nowhere else but here. You feel the temperature too, cool but not cold, damp but not wet, the kind of soft coolness that makes you want to wrap yourself in wool and walk for hours without ever feeling too hot or too cold. It is the perfect temperature for thinking long thoughts, for contemplation and quiet reflection, for the kind of deep comfort that comes not from warmth alone, but from the right balance of all things. The humidity softens everything, makes the air itself feel like a gentle embrace, neither dry enough to parch nor wet enough to chill. As you drift lower still, you begin to hear the sounds of England, though they come to you muted and gentle, as though heard through layers of time. The distant bleating of sheep, a sound that has echoed across these hills since before history began. The call of rooks from the high trees around manor houses, harsh yet somehow comforting in its familiarity. The subtle rustle of wind through barley fields, like the earth whispering secrets to itself. And underneath it all, so quiet you might miss it, the constant gentle patter of light rain on leaves, that most English of sounds, reliable as breathing. There's also the sound of water, not dramatic cataracts, but the gentle gurgle of brooks, the splash of village fords, the quiet conversation of rivers with their banks. The country below you is not spectacular in the way mountains or deserts are spectacular. It does not shout its beauty or demand attention. Instead, it invites you to look closer, to slow down, to notice the particular way morning light catches on wet cobblestones, or how shadows pool in the doorways of ancient churches. It is a landscape that rewards patience, that reveals itself slowly, like a friendship deepening over years rather than days. Every hollow has its story, every hill its legend, every crossroads its ghost. You see now how the modern world has touched this ancient place but not conquered it. The motorways thread between the hills, but from up here they seem thin and temporary compared to the Roman roads that still run straight as arrows across the countryside. The cities spread their suburbs into the green, but they too seem to be slowly absorbed, gentled by gardens and parks until even London, that great sprawling metropolis, appears from this height to be just another settlement in a land that has seen so many come and go. The pylons march across the fields carrying electricity, but they too have become part of the landscape, their geometric forms softened by the birds that nest on them, the vines that climb their bases. These seasons have left their mark on what you see below. This is a country that knows all 4 seasons intimately, that changes its dress completely from the fresh green of spring to the gold and russet of autumn, from the spare beauty of winter to the full lushness of summer. Even now, in whatever season you find yourself observing, you can sense the others waiting in the wings, ready to transform the landscape once again in the endless cycle that has been turning since the ice retreated and the first wildflowers bloomed. You can see this in the trees, some still holding their leaves, others bare, some just beginning to bud, all at different stages of their annual journey. You notice the waterways more clearly now, not just the rivers, but the countless streams and brooks that feed them, the village ponds that reflect the sky like small mirrors, the canals that thread through the countryside carrying narrow boats painted in traditional roses and castles. Water is everywhere here, not dramatic like waterfalls or rapids, but gentle, persistent, patient, wearing away stone, feeding the mills, nurturing the water meadows where rare orchids grow. The dew ponds on the high downs catch your eye, perfect circles of water that have served shepherds and their flocks for centuries, some natural, some made by human hands so long ago that no one remembers their making. The woodland draws your attention, patches of deep green darkness scattered across the lighter countryside. Some are ancient woods, remnants of the great wildwood that once covered this land, where bluebells carpet the floor in spring, and deer move like shadows between trees that were old when the Normans came. Others are newer, planted for timber or pleasure, but even these have something ancient about them, as though the memory of forest lives in the very soil, and any trees planted here quickly remember what they are meant to be. You can see the different characters of these woods, the airy beech hangers on the chalk downs, the dense oak woods of the Weald, the birch and pine of heathland edges, each with its own quality of light and shadow. As you continue your gentle descent, you begin to understand that this is not just a landscape, but a palimpsest, layer upon layer of human history written on the earth. Celtic field systems lie beneath Roman roads, which are crossed by Saxon boundaries, overlaid with Norman churches, Tudor manor houses, Georgian crescents, Victorian railways. Each age has added its own handwriting to the document of the land, but none has entirely erased what came before. You can see this layering in the way a modern road follows an ancient track for miles, then suddenly veers away where some long-forgotten obstacle once stood. The quality of the light continues to mesmerize you. It changes constantly but subtly, clouds moving across the sun like thoughts across a dreaming mind, creating an endless play of brightness and shadow that makes the landscape seem alive, breathing, thinking its long, slow thoughts. Sometimes a break in the cloud sends a shaft of light down like a divine finger, pointing to some particular field or cottage, illuminating it briefly in gold before moving on, leaving it to settle back into the general gentle grey. These moments of illumination seem meaningful, as though the landscape is showing you its treasures one by one. You realise that this is a landscape made for walking, for the slow traverse on foot that allows you to feel the earth beneath you, to match your pace to its ancient rhythms. Every footpath you see from your height has a story. Some are old drove roads where cattle were herded to market, others are pilgrim ways leading to Canterbury or Walsingham. Many are simply the accumulated desire lines of villagers, walking to church or market for generations beyond counting. The paths are worn deep in places, sunken lanes between high banks topped with trees whose roots are exposed by centuries of passing feet. The farms spread out below you, each one a small kingdom of barns and yards, of fields known by names that go back centuries: Longmeadow, Churchfield, Rabbit Warren, 16 acres. You can see how they fit into the landscape like pieces of a puzzle, their boundaries following the contours of the land, working with it rather than against it, a collaboration between human need and natural form that has created something neither could achieve alone. The farmhouses themselves sit solid and square, surrounded by their outbuildings like hens with chicks, weathered by centuries but still strong, still sheltering the endless cycle of sowing and harvest. As your descent continues, you feel yourself becoming part of this landscape, rather than merely observing it. The cool air fills your lungs, carrying with it all those scents of rain and earth and growing things. The soft light bathes you, gentle as a mother's touch. The silence, which is not really silence but a tapestry of small, peaceful sounds, wraps around you like a comfortable blanket. You're no longer above England but within it, part of its dreaming, part of its long, slow breath. You understand now why this landscape has inspired so many poets and painters, writers and dreamers. It is not dramatic or demanding. It does not insist upon anything. It simply is, with a completeness and confidence that comes from great age and settled identity. It knows what it is and has no need to be anything else. This is a landscape that has learned the art of being rather than becoming, of presence rather than progress. The England spread below you is both real and mythical, both the actual land of fields and villages and the dream England that lives in the imagination, where Robin Hood still walks in Sherwood Forest and King Arthur sleeps beneath Glastonbury Tor. The two are not separate but intertwined, the mythical growing from the real like flowers from soil, and the real made richer by the stories it has nurtured. Every hill might be the hill, every wood the wood of legend, every castle ruin the setting for some half-remembered tale of knights and quests. You have descended now, your feet finding the earth at last, and the England that was spread below you like a living map has become immediate, tangible, real. The ground beneath you is soft with centuries of fallen leaves, and as you take your first steps you feel the particular give of English soil, neither too hard nor too soft, but yielding just enough to make walking a pleasure rather than a task. You find yourself beside a chalk stream in Hampshire, one of those rare and perfect watercourses that exist only where the geology is exactly right. The water is so clear you can see every piece of flint on the bottom, every strand of water crowfoot that waves in the gentle current like green hair. This is not water as you might know it elsewhere. This is water that has been filtered through chalk for decades, perhaps centuries, emerging from springs as pure as liquid crystal, cold even in summer, constant in its flow. The stream moves with a quiet purpose, neither rushing nor dawdling, maintaining the steady pace it has kept for thousands of years. Where it runs shallow over gravel beds, it makes a sound like whispered conversations, too quiet to make out the words but comforting in its constancy. The water is gin clear, with that particular quality of chalk streams where the light seems to gather and pool, making the water appear to glow from within. Along the banks, watercress grows in dark green masses, and you can smell its peppery sharpness mixing with the clean scent of water and wet stone. Water voles have made their homes in the banks, though you see only the occasional ripple where one has slipped into the water at your approach. The banks themselves are undercut in places by the patient work of water, creating small caves and overhangs where trout shelter in the heat of the day. You follow the stream as it winds through water meadows, those ancient managed wetlands that flood in winter and dry to rich pasture in summer. The grass here is different from the grass of ordinary fields. It's lusher, darker, studded with wildflowers that thrive in the damp soil. Meadowsweet raises its cream-coloured heads above the grass, filling the air with the scent of honey and almonds. Purple leucostrife stands in colonies where the ground is wettest, and everywhere there are the seed heads of sedges and rushes, each one perfectly formed, catching the light like tiny lanterns. The meadows have a quality of timelessness about them. They've been managed this way for so long that the management has become part of nature. The human hand so gentle and consistent that it's become indistinguishable from natural process. The channels that carry water through the meadows, the carriers and drains, were dug by hand centuries ago but now look as natural as any stream, their banks thick with yellow flag iris and water mint. As you move away from the stream, the landscape changes, and you find yourself entering ancient woodland, perhaps a remnant of the New Forest or the Forest of Dean. The temperature drops immediately as you pass from sunlight into shadow, and the quality of the air changes too, becoming thicker, richer, heavy with the scent of decomposition and growth, that particular forest smell of life and death intertwined. The trees here are old beyond easy comprehension. Oaks that were already ancient when Shakespeare was born spread their massive branches overhead, each branch as thick as an ordinary tree trunk, gnarled and twisted by centuries of growth. Their bark is deeply furrowed, like the skin of something impossibly old, and in the furrows grow lichens and mosses, small ferns and even tiny trees, each oak a world unto itself, supporting hundreds of other species. Beech trees stand among the oaks, their smooth grey bark like elephant skin, their branches reaching up to create a canopy so dense that little grows beneath them except a carpet of old leaves, copper-coloured and crisp, that rustle softly as you walk. Where a beech has fallen, perhaps a century ago, it lies like the body of a titan, slowly returning to earth, covered in fungi that glow pale in the dim light. Brackets and mushrooms, some hard as wood, others soft as flesh, all doing their patient work of transformation. The light in the forest is like nothing else you've experienced. It filters through layers of leaves, each layer removing a little more of its strength, until what reaches the forest floor is gentle, green-tinted, constantly moving as the canopy shifts in breezes too high to feel at ground level. Patches of bright sunlight occasionally break through, illuminating a fern or a fallen log with theatrical intensity, making it glow like something enchanted before the gap in the canopy closes and the ordinary dimness returns. You notice the silence here, but it's not really silence. It's a different quality of sound, muffled and ancient. Your footsteps are absorbed by the leaf litter, and even your breathing seems quieter. But if you stand still and listen, you hear the forest's own sounds, the creak of wood adjusting to temperature changes, the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth, the distant drilling of a woodpecker that echoes through the trees like a wooden bell. The undergrowth varies depending on the light. Where enough sun penetrates, brambles form impenetrable thickets, their thorns catching at anything that passes. Bracken grows tall in the clearings, its fronds unfurling like ancient scrolls. In the deepest shade, only moss grows, covering everything in a green velvet that's soft to the touch and springy underfoot. Some of these mosses are so thick you can sink your whole hand into them, feeling the cool moisture they hold even in dry weather. Holly trees grow in the understory, their leaves dark and glossy, perpetually green even in the depths of winter. Some of these hollies are ancient too, their trunks thick and gnarly, nothing like the neat bushes of suburban gardens. Yew trees stand in the darkest places, their needles poisonous, their trunks hollow with age but still vigorously alive, some of them older than Christianity in these islands, witnesses to the old religions that once held their shade sacred. You come across a clearing where a giant oak has recently fallen, perhaps in a winter storm. The gap it's left in the canopy has created a pool of light, and already the race has begun to fill it. Seedlings of birch and ash, oak and beech, all stretching upward, competing for this precious resource. The fallen oak itself is already becoming something new. Its root plate, torn from the earth, has created a small cliff of soil and stones, a new habitat for different plants. Its trunk will be home to beetles and fungi, birds and small mammals for decades to come. Leaving the woodland, you emerge onto open moorland, perhaps the Peak District, or the North York Moors. The transition is abrupt, from the enclosed, secretive world of the forest to the vast openness of the moor, where the sky suddenly seems enormous and the horizon impossibly distant. The wind, barely noticeable in the forest, is constant here, not strong but persistent, carrying with it the scent of peat and heather. The ground beneath your feet changes completely. Instead of soft leaf litter, you're walking on springy peat, built up over millennia from the partly decomposed remains of sphagnum moss and other plants. Each step compresses it slightly, and sometimes you feel it quake beneath you, especially where it's wettest, as though you're walking on a giant sponge. The peat holds water like a memory, releasing it slowly through the year, turning streams brown with its tannins, preserving anything buried in it for thousands of years. Heather stretches in all directions, a low sea of purple in late summer, brown and grey at other times. If you look closely, you see it's not uniform but varies in age and height. Some areas recently burned in controlled fires to encourage new growth for grouse, other areas old and woody, providing shelter for small birds and mammals. The heather has a particular scent when you brush against it, resinous and sweet, especially on warm days when the sun draws out its oils. Among the heather grow other moorland plants, each adapted to this harsh environment. Bilberry, known locally as wimberry, grows in the shelter of rocks, its small leaves turning brilliant red in autumn, its purple berries sweet and staining. Cotton grass waves its white tufts in boggy areas, looking like scattered snowflakes even in summer. Bog asphodel brightens wet areas with its yellow stars, and sundews spread their sticky leaves to catch unwary insects, supplementing the poor nutrition of the peat with captured protein. The moorland has its own architecture of stone. Gritstone edges rise like walls, their surfaces weathered into fantastic shapes by wind and rain, frost and sun. The rock is rough with crystals of quartz that glitter in sunlight, and its surface is patterned with lichens, crusty yellows and oranges, grey-greens and whites, some so slow-growing that a patch the size of your hand might be centuries old. Where the rock is split along its natural joints, it forms perfect geometric patterns, as though cut by some giant mason. In the valleys between the moors, you find a different world. Here, streams have cut deep channels called cloughs, their sides steep and covered with rowan and birch, their bottoms rocky and musical with falling water. These valleys are sheltered from the wind, and in them grow plants that couldn't survive on the open moor, ferns and mosses, wood sorrel and wild garlic. The streams themselves are amber-coloured from the peat, but clear, and in their pools you can see small trout holding steady against the current. You climb now toward the Lake District, and the landscape changes again, becoming more dramatic but still maintaining that essential English quality of being worn smooth by time rather than sharp with youth. The fells rise around you, not mountains in the alpine sense, but something uniquely their own. Steep-sided, rounded at the tops, covered in grass and bracken rather than rock and ice. Though rock breaks through in places, ancient volcanic and metamorphic stone that tells of a violent past now made peaceful by ages of weather. The path you follow is old, perhaps originally made by sheep, then worn deeper by generations of farmers and walkers. In places it's paved with stones set on edge, the work of Victorian path builders who understood that the Lake District rain needed somewhere to run. These pitched paths climb steadily, zigzagging up the steeper sections, always finding the easiest way up, the way that countless feet have determined through trial and error over centuries. As you climb, the vegetation changes. The bracken of the lower slopes gives way to grass, and the grass becomes shorter and tougher the higher you go. Near the tops, only the hardiest plants survive. Alpine grasses, mosses, and lichens that can withstand the wind and cold. The soil is thin here, and in places bare rock shows through, scoured clean by wind and rain, marked with scratches from glaciers that melted 10,000 years ago. From the fell top you can see the lakes spread below, each one a perfect mirror when the wind drops, reflecting the sky and surrounding fells so perfectly that it becomes hard to tell where water ends and air begins. Derwent Water lies before you, its surface broken by small islands, each one a miniature world of trees and rocks. The water is dark but clear, stained by peat but pure, cold even in summer, holding its own mysteries in its depths. You descend toward the lake, and the landscape softens again. The rough grass of the fells gives way to the improved pasture of the valleys, where sheep graze in fields divided by dry stone walls. These walls are works of art in themselves, built without mortar, each stone chosen for its shape and size, fitted together like a three-dimensional puzzle. They run straight up impossible slopes, never wavering, testament to the skill and determination of the wallers who built them. Near the lakeshore you enter a different kind of woodland from the ancient forest you walked through earlier. This is Atlantic oak woodland, shaped by the wet climate of the western lakes. The trees are smaller, twisted by wind, covered in a thick coat of mosses and ferns. Every surface is green with growth. Mosses cover the trunks, ferns grow from the branches, Lichens hang like raggedy beards. This is temperate rainforest, as lush in its way as any tropical jungle, though quieter, more subtle in its abundance. The lakeshore itself is a constantly changing boundary between land and water. In some places it's rocky, with boulders worn smooth by waves extending into the water, creating perfect spots to sit and watch the light change on the water. In other places it's pebbly, the stones graded by size as the waves have sorted them over millennia. In sheltered bays there are small beaches of sand, and here you find the delicate tracks of birds written temporarily on the smooth surface. The water at the edge is clear enough to see the bottom, covered with rocks green with algae, among which small fish dart. Water plants grow in the shallows, water lilies in the quiet bays, their white flowers perfect against the dark water, reeds and rushes where streams enter the lake, creating small deltas of silt and vegetation. The margin between water and land is blurred, neither quite one thing nor the other, a liminal space where different worlds meet. You notice how the light plays on the water, constantly changing, never the same twice. Sometimes the surface is mirror smooth, reflecting the fells and sky so perfectly that the world seems doubled. Then a breeze springs up, and the surface breaks into a million tiny waves, each one catching the light differently, turning the lake into a sheet of hammered silver. Clouds pass over, and their shadows race across the water, dark patches moving like thoughts across the lake's mind. The sounds here are subtle but constant. The lap of small waves on the shore, rhythmic and soothing, the distant bleating of sheep on the fells, the call of birds over the water. Sometimes you hear the splash of a fish jumping, or the rattle of pebbles as a wave larger than the rest rearranges the shore. But mostly it's quiet, the kind of quiet that enters into you, slowing your breathing, calming your thoughts. As evening approaches, the light begins to change. The fells catch the last sun and glow golden, their shadows lengthening across the valleys. The lake becomes a sheet of gold and silver, too bright to look at where it reflects the sun, dark as ink in the shadows. The temperature drops and mist begins to form in the valleys, rising from the rivers and streams, pooling in the hollows, beginning the transformation that will, by morning, fill the valleys with a sea of white fog, leaving only the fell tops rising like islands. You walk along the shore as the light fades, feeling the ancient rhythm of this landscape, unchanged in its essentials since the ice retreated, and the first plants began to colonize the bare rock. The same processes that shaped it then are still at work. Water wearing away stone, plants breaking down rock into soil, the slow, patient work of weather and time. But overlaid on this natural process is the long history of human habitation, so ancient and so gentle that it has become part of the natural order. The stone circles on the moors, the ancient field system still visible as marks in the grass, the old drove roads and pack horse routes, the mines and quarries now greened over, all speak of people who lived with this landscape rather than on it, who understood its moods and seasons, who shaped it, and were shaped by it in return. This is not wilderness in the American sense, untouched and pristine. This is landscape as partnership, a conversation between human and nature that has been going on for so long that it's impossible to say where one voice ends and the other begins. As darkness begins to fall, you find yourself in a quiet valley, perhaps in the Yorkshire Dales, where a river runs between limestone hills. The limestone gives the landscape a different character from the volcanic rocks of the lakes or the gritstone of the Peak District. It's paler, more porous, full of caves and underground streams. The river appears and disappears, running underground for miles before emerging again clear and cold from a spring at the base of a cliff. The vegetation here is different too. The limestone soil supports plants that won't grow on acid moorland, orchids and gentians, wild thyme and marjoram. The grass is shorter, sweeter, cropped close by sheep but studded with wildflowers. In the limestone pavement areas, where the rock has been dissolved by rain into fantastic patterns of clints and grikes, tiny forests grow in the deep cracks, protected from grazing, creating miniature worlds of ferns and flowers. You can feel the history in this landscape too, but it's even older than the human history. In the limestone are fossils, the remains of sea creatures from when this was a tropical ocean floor 300 million years ago. Crinoids and brachiopods, corals and shells, all turned to stone but still perfect in their detail, reminders that even the eternal seeming hills are temporary, that everything changes given enough time. The evening is still now, the wind that was constant on the moors having died away to nothing. The only sounds are the river, constant and soothing, and the evening songs of birds settling for the night. The light has become golden, then pink, and now it's fading to the deep blue of twilight. The first stars are appearing, and you realise that this same view, these same stars over these same hills, has been seen by everyone who has ever stood in this spot, from the first humans to arrive after the ice through all the generations to now. This is the physical geography of England, but it's impossible to separate the physical from the cultural, the natural from the human. Every hill has been climbed, every valley farmed, every river crossed. The very shape of the land has been determined as much by human activity as by natural processes. The moorlands were once forest, cleared by prehistoric farmers. The meadows were created by medieval agriculture. Even the wilderness is, in a sense, cultivated, maintained in its wildness by careful management. Yet for all this human influence, the land maintains its own character, its own presence. It shapes the people who live on it as much as they shape it. The weather works on human and landscape alike. The same rain that feeds the rivers and grows the grass also shapes the character of those who live with it. The ancient rhythms of the land, the seasons, the tides, the cycles of growth and decay, become the rhythms of human life until it's impossible to imagine one without the other. The stars that have emerged above you have watched over this land for countless ages, and as you move through the gathering twilight, you feel yourself drawn toward the monuments that ancient peoples raised toward these same stars. On a high moorland plateau, perhaps on Bodmin Moor or in the Lake District Fells, you come upon a circle of standing stones, arranged with purpose and precision by people whose names and languages are lost to time. The stones stand dark against the dying light, each one unique yet part of a greater whole. They are not the smooth pillars you might have imagined, but rough, weathered things, their surfaces pocked and scarred by millennia of wind and rain. Lichens have colonised them in patches of grey and orange, and in the crevices tiny ferns have found enough soil to take root. Each stone has its own character, some tall and thin, others broad and squat, some leaning as though tired from their long vigil, others still standing as straight as the day they were raised. You approach slowly, with the instinctive reverence that such places command. The grass around the stones is shorter, worn by the feet of countless visitors over the centuries, from the original builders through Bronze Age traders, Roman soldiers, Saxon farmers, medieval pilgrims, Victorian antiquarians to modern seekers like yourself. All have stood where you stand now, looking up at these ancient sentinels, wondering at their purpose, feeling their presence. Your hand reaches out to touch one of the stones, and you feel the roughness of its surface, the coldness that seems to come from deep within. This is not the cold of winter air, but something older, deeper, as though the stone remembers the ice ages, holds them still in its crystalline heart. The texture is complex, smooth in places where hands have touched it over millennia, rough where the weather has worked at it, creating tiny landscapes of ridges and valleys, miniature worlds of erosion and time. The placement of the stones is precise, though the precision speaks of different priorities than our own. They align with celestial events, the midsummer sunrise, the midwinter sunset, the movements of moon and stars that mark the passage of time for people who lived by such observations. But there's more to it than mere calendar keeping. There's an aesthetic element, a rightness to their placement that speaks to something deeper than practical purpose. They frame views of distant hills, create sightlines to other ancient sites, mark places where the Earth's energy seems to gather and pool. As the light continues to fade, the stones begin to merge with the darkness, becoming shadows against shadow. But their presence remains, perhaps even stronger in the dark when sight fails and other senses take over. You can feel them around you, their mass affecting the movement of air, creating subtle currents and eddies. The sound changes too within the circle. Voices carry differently, footsteps echo strangely, as though the stones create their own acoustic space, separate from the open moor around them. You think of the people who raised these stones, working without metal tools, without wheels, without written plans. They quarried the stones miles away, transported them across rough terrain, raised them into position using techniques we can only guess at. It would have taken the coordinated effort of entire communities, perhaps over generations. Yet they did it, driven by beliefs and purposes we can only imagine, creating monuments that have outlasted their creators by thousands of years. The mystery of the stones is part of their power. We don't know exactly why they were built, what ceremonies took place here, what beliefs they embodied. Archaeological evidence provides hints, burials, offerings, signs of repeated gatherings, but the full truth remains elusive. This not knowing creates a space for imagination, for wonder, for the kind of deep thinking that modern life rarely allows. The stones invite contemplation without providing answers, offering presence without explanation. As you leave the stone circle, following an old path down from the moors, you find yourself approaching a village, one of thousands that dot the English countryside. The church tower appears first, square and solid, rising above the surrounding trees. As you draw closer, you see the churchyard walls, built of the same stone as the church itself, topped with lichens and mosses, the mortar crumbling in places but the structure still sound. The lich gate welcomes you into the churchyard, its wooden roof dark with age, the bench beneath it worn smooth by generations of coffin bearers resting their burden before the final journey to the grave. The path to the church door is paved with stone slabs, uneven now, lifted by the roots of ancient yews, worn into hollows by countless feet. On either side, gravestones lean at various angles, their inscriptions softened by weather until only fragments remain legible. Beloved wife, fell asleep, in sure and certain hope. The church door is massive, oak darkened to almost black, studded with iron that has rusted to the colour of dried blood. The iron handle is worn smooth, polished by countless hands over centuries. As you lift the latch and push, the door swings open on hinges that creak, with a sound that seems to come from the Middle Ages, a sound that hasn't changed in 500 years. Inside, the temperature drops, and the quality of light changes completely. It's dimmer but richer, coloured by stained glass windows that break the afternoon sun into ribbons of red and blue, green and gold. The windows tell stories, saints and miracles, parables and prophecies, but age has made them abstract, their details lost to time, leaving only the pure colour, washing across the stone floor in patterns that shift as clouds pass over the sun. The floor itself tells its own story. Stone slabs worn smooth, some carved with names and dates, marking where the wealthy dead lie beneath. You can make out fragments. Here lieth, dates in Roman numerals, skulls and hourglasses reminding the living of mortality. In places, the stones are worn into deep hollows, where generations have knelt to pray, where the same feet have trod the same path from door to altar for centuries. The pillars that hold up the roof are massive, carved from single pieces of stone, their capitals decorated with leaves and faces, green men and angels carved by medieval masons who signed their work not with names, but with distinctive marks. A mason's mark scratched into the stone, the only signature they needed. Some pillars lean slightly, shifted by the settling of foundations over centuries, but still standing, still strong, still doing the work they were designed to do. In the chancel, the light is different, more golden, filtered through eastern windows that catch the morning sun. The altar is simple, covered with a white cloth, bearing silver that glows dully in the dim light. Behind it, carved into the wall, are the 10 Commandments, painted in a script so elaborate it's almost illegible. gold leaf still clinging to some letters, flaking away from others. The pews are dark wood, polished by use, each one slightly different, made by local craftsmen over the centuries as the congregation grew or shrank. Some have carved ends. Poppy heads, they're called, though they look more like pine cones or abstract flames. Others are plain, Puritan in their simplicity. All are smoothed by the countless hands that have gripped them while standing for hymns, by the backs that have rested against them during long sermons. You sit in one of these pews and feel the particular quality of church silence. It's not empty silence, but full silence, heavy with the accumulated prayers and songs of centuries. Every whispered confession, every joyful hymn, every mournful funeral dirge seems to have left something of itself in the air, creating an atmosphere thick with human emotion, refined by time into something pure and peaceful. The walls bear traces of their history. Here, the ghost of a medieval wall painting, saints processing across lime-washed plaster. There, Victorian memorial tablets, marble carved with flowing script, recording the virtues of long-dead squires and their wives. Military flags hang from the rafters, their colours faded, their fabric fragile, remembering wars that are themselves becoming legend. In a side chapel, even quieter than the main church, you find a tomb, perhaps of a crusader knight and his lady. They lie in stone, side by side, their faces worn almost smooth, their hands pressed together in eternal prayer. At their feet, a small dog, loyal even in stone. The detail that remains, the fold of a sleeve, the chainmail visible at the knight's neck, the elaborate headdress of his lady, speaks of the skill of the carver, the importance of the carved, the belief that this representation would somehow carry forward into eternity. Leaving the church, you walk through the churchyard, reading what you can of the gravestones. The older ones are works of art in themselves, carved with symbols, weeping willows for grief, anchors for hope, hands pointing heavenward for faith. The inscriptions speak of lives lived quietly but fully. 50 years a shepherd, schoolmistress of this parish, who fell asleep after a long illness patiently borne. Each stone marks not just a death but a life, a thread in the tapestry of village history. Beyond the churchyard, the village itself spreads out, a collection of cottages that seem to have grown from the earth rather than been built upon it. The walls are of local stone, the same stone as the church, the same stone as the field walls that divide the landscape. It's as though the village is simply another expression of the underlying geology, shaped by human hands but essentially of the place itself. You follow a footpath that leads up into the hills above the village, and here you encounter the art of dry stone walling at its finest. A wall runs along the path, built without mortar, each stone chosen for its shape and size, fitted together with a precision that speaks of deep understanding of the material. The wall is not just a boundary, but a sculpture, following the contours of the land, rising and falling with the terrain. You stop to examine the wall more closely, running your hands over the stones, feeling how each one locks into its neighbours, how the whole structure holds together through careful balance, and the patient accumulation of skill. The stones are of different types, some smooth and water-worn, others angular and freshly split. Each has been assessed, turned, tried in different positions until it found its perfect place. The technique is ancient but still practiced. You can see where repairs have been made, where sections have been rebuilt after storm or frost damage. The new work is indistinguishable from the old except for the slightly sharper edges of recently placed stones, the absence of lichen on the newly exposed surfaces. In time, these too will weather, will grow their coat of lichen, will become indistinguishable from stones placed centuries ago. The walls create a pattern across the landscape that is both functional and beautiful. They divide the land into manageable parcels, provide shelter for sheep, mark boundaries that have legal and social meaning. But they also create a visual rhythm, a texture that makes the landscape readable, that gives it human scale. Without the walls, the fells would be vast and featureless. With them, they become comprehensible, measured, known. In places, the walls incorporate other elements, a gate made of the same stone, massive slabs that pivot on projecting stones, worn smooth where hands have pushed them open for generations, stiles where the wall steps up and over, each step worn into a hollow by climbing feet. Sheep creeps, small openings at the base just large enough for a sheep to squeeze through, allowing controlled movement between fields. The craft of walling is passed down through generations, father to son, master to apprentice. It's a physical knowledge, held in the hands as much as the head. How to read a stone, to see its potential shape within the rough exterior. How to split stone along its grain, to shape it with minimal working. How to build a wall that will stand for centuries, flexible enough to accommodate frost and settling, strong enough to withstand the worst winter storms. As evening deepens into night, you find yourself in a cottage garden, perhaps behind one of those stone houses in the village. This is another kind of craft, another way of shaping the world through patient, skillful work. The garden is small, enclosed by walls and hedges, creating a private world separate from but connected to the landscape beyond. The design is not formal in the grand manner of estate gardens, but it has its own order, its own logic. Paths of worn brick or gravel wind between beds that overflow with plants. There's a careful carelessness to it, as though the plants have chosen their own positions, but you can see the guiding hand in the colour combinations, the succession of blooms, the balance of heights and textures. The roses are the heart of the garden, climbing over arches and walls, their scent heavy in the evening air. These are old varieties, not bred for perfect form or perpetual flowering, but for fragrance and the particular beauty of flowers that bloom once, magnificently then rest. Their names speak of their history. Rosa Mundi, striped red and white, said to be named for fair Rosamond, mistress of Henry II. Maiden's blush, with petals of the palest pink. Cardinal de Richelieu, deep purple, almost black in certain lights. Among the roses grow other cottage garden plants, the flowers that have been grown in English gardens for centuries. Hollyhocks against the walls, their flowers like crumpled silk. Delphiniums rising in spires of blue, each tiny flower perfect in its complexity. Sweet peas climbing bamboo canes. Their fragrance different from the roses, lighter, more innocent somehow. Lavender in neat hedges, releasing its scent when brushed against. A scent that seems to contain the essence of summer. The vegetables are here too, not separated into a kitchen garden but mixed with the flowers. Runner beans climb tripods of hazel poles, their scarlet flowers as decorative as any purely ornamental plant. Lettuce edges paths, its leaves ranging from green to bronze. Herbs grow everywhere, sage and thyme, oregano and marjoram, each adding its own scent to the evening air. You sit on a wooden bench, weathered to silver grey, positioned to catch the last of the evening sun. The garden surrounds you with its gentle chaos, its controlled wildness. Bees work late in the evening light, their humming a constant background to the other sounds. The rustle of leaves, the distant sound of the village, a blackbird singing its evening song from the top of an apple tree. The apple tree is old, its trunk gnarled, its branches spreading wide. It's been pruned over the years, shaped to fit the space, to produce fruit rather than wood. In autumn it will bear apples, perhaps an old variety, Ashmead's kernel, or Cox's orange pippin, with flavours complex and subtle, nothing like the uniform sweetness of commercial varieties. For now the developing fruits are small and green, hidden among the leaves. The soil in the garden is different from the earth outside. It's been worked for generations, enriched with compost and manure, until it's become something almost artificial in its richness. Dark, crumbly, full of worms and other soil creatures that turn waste into fertility. When you pick up a handful, it feels alive, warm from the day's sun, smelling of growth and decay in perfect balance. This tradition of gardening goes back to the monastery gardens of the Middle Ages, where monks grew herbs for medicine and flowers for the altar. It developed through the cottage gardens of agricultural workers who supplemented their diet with homegrown vegetables and found beauty in flowers that cost nothing but time and care. It reached its artistic peak in the gardens of the arts and crafts movement, where the traditional cottage garden was elevated to an art form while maintaining its essential simplicity. The tools of gardening have barely changed. The spade and fork, the hoe and rake, the watering can and wheelbarrow. They're simple tools, their forms perfected over centuries of use. In the shed at the bottom of the garden, they hang in their places, cleaned and oiled, ready for tomorrow's work. There's something deeply satisfying about these tools, their weight and balance, the smooth wood of their handles polished by use. The garden changes through the seasons, each one bringing its own tasks and rewards. Spring's burst of growth and the endless battle with weeds. Summer's abundance, when there are more flowers than vases, more vegetables than can be eaten. Autumn's harvest, and the melancholy beauty of dying foliage. Winter's rest, when the structure of the garden is revealed, when plans are made for next year's improvements. This is gardening not as conquest, but as conversation, a dialogue between human desire and natural process. The gardener guides but doesn't control, suggests but doesn't dictate. Plants self-seed where they will, and if the effect is pleasing, they are allowed to stay. Happy accidents are embraced, failures composted and forgotten. It's an attitude that extends beyond the garden, a way of being in the world that accepts imperfection, that finds beauty in the unplanned. As you leave the garden and walk back through the village, you pass the pub, its windows glowing warm in the darkness. Inside you glimpse the bar, dark wood polished by countless elbows, brass fittings gleaming in the lamplight. The sound of quiet conversation drifts out, punctuated by laughter, the clink of glasses. This too is tradition, the gathering place where news is exchanged, where the life of the village is discussed and determined. The village shop closed now, its window displaying a mixture of necessities and luxuries, newspapers and fresh bread, Wellington boots and birthday cards. The post office counter in the corner, where pensions are collected and gossip exchanged. The village hall, where parish councils meet, where amateur dramatics are performed, where wedding receptions and funeral teas mark the passages of life. You walk on, out of the village and into the countryside beyond. The moon has risen, full or nearly so, casting silver light across the fields. In this light the landscape is transformed, becoming something from a dream or a half-remembered story. The stones of the walls gleam white, the trees cast black shadows, the church tower rises like something from a fairy tale. An owl calls from the woodland, that haunting sound that seems to embody the mystery of night. It's answered by another, further away, and for a moment you imagine the messages passing through the darkness, the night shift taking over from the day. A fox barks in the distance, sharp and wild, reminding you that beneath the cultivated surface, wildness persists. You come upon another ancient site, perhaps a Bronze Age barrow, a burial mound rising from the field like a grass-covered bubble. These dots on the landscape, marked on Ordnance Survey maps with Gothic script, are graves of people who lived 3,000 years ago or more. They chose high places, visible for miles, marking their territory even in death. The mounds are often open now, their treasures in museums, but something remains, some sense of presence that transcends the physical. Standing on the barrow you can see for miles in the moonlight. Other barrows dot the horizon, connected by invisible lines of sight, creating a sacred geography that we can map but not fully understand. They speak of a time when the landscape was read differently, when hills and valleys, springs and stones had meanings we've forgotten. Yet something of that meaning persists, felt, if not understood, sensed, if not articulated. The tradition of marking the landscape continues. War memorials in every village, listing the names of those who didn't return from Flanders fields or Normandy beaches. Simple stones by roadsides marking where someone died, flowers still placed there years later. Benches on hilltops with brass plaques, in memory of one who loved this view. We still feel the need to inscribe ourselves on the landscape, to leave some mark that says we were here, we mattered, we're remembered. You follow an old road, perhaps a Roman road, straight as an arrow across the countryside. These roads are monuments in themselves, built to last, their foundations going down deep, their surfaces cambered for drainage. They've been resurfaced countless times, but the roots remain. The straightness that speaks of empire, of efficiency, of a different relationship with the landscape than the winding lanes of later ages. Along the road, you pass milestones, their inscriptions worn but still legible. London 73 miles, York 45 miles. They speak of a time when distance was measured in days of travel, when these stones were vital navigation aids for travellers in a landscape without signs. Now they stand as monuments to a different pace of life, when travel was rare and difficult, when most people lived and died within a few miles of where they were born. The traditions of the road persist in other ways. The drovers' roads across the Highlands, wide enough for herds of cattle, marked by stout stones where the drovers rested. The pilgrim ways to Canterbury and Walsingham, worn deep by faithful feet. The corpse roads, along which bodies were carried to distant churches for burial, their routes still known, still slightly avoided after dark. You come to a bridge, old and narrow, its stones worn smooth by water and weather. Bridges are special places in the folklore of England, boundaries between worlds, places where bargains are made, where trolls lurk, where lovers meet. This bridge is peaceful enough, but you can sense its importance, the way it concentrates the landscape, forcing all traffic through this one point. The parapet is low, and you lean over to watch the water flow beneath. The river is dark in the moonlight, but you can hear it clearly, the eternal sound of water over stone. How many have stood where you stand, watching this same water, thinking their own thoughts? Soldiers marching to war, merchants hauling goods, lovers meeting in secret, children playing, all have crossed this bridge, adding their stories to its accumulated history. The watermills are mostly silent now, their wheels still are removed, but the buildings remain, converted to houses or museums. Yet the races and leats remain, the channels that brought water to the wheels, dry now but still visible, their engineering still impressive. The millers knew their rivers intimately, knew how to read the water, when to open the sluices, when to lift the stones. It was knowledge passed down through generations, lost now except in the careful reconstructions of heritage sites. As dawn approaches, you find yourself at another kind of monument, a great house, perhaps Elizabethan or Georgian, sitting in its park like a jewel in a setting. These houses are monuments to wealth and power, but also to aesthetic ambition, to the desire to create beauty on a grand scale. The house sleeps in the pre-dawn darkness, its windows reflecting the last stars, its chimneys beginning to smoke as the first servants start their day. The park around the house is itself a work of art, landscape shaped by designers like Capability Brown or Humphrey Repton, who moved hills and dammed streams to create their visions of perfected nature. Ancient trees stand in careful arrangements, each one placed for effect, to frame a view or provide a focal point. Lakes reflect the sky, their shores carefully sculpted to appear natural while being entirely artificial. The walled garden beside the house is different from the cottage garden, but equally traditional. Here the walls are higher, the design more formal. Espalier fruit trees are trained against the warm south-facing walls, their branches spread in perfect symmetry. The vegetable beds are arranged in geometric patterns, paths between them gravelled and edged with box hedges. The greenhouse gleams with condensation, tropical plants thriving in the warm, humid atmosphere. This is gardening as high art, requiring armies of gardeners, endless resources, perfect maintenance. Yet it shares something with the cottage garden, the same love of plants, the same understanding of soil and season, the same patient work of cultivation. Both are expressions of the same impulse, to shape nature into something that satisfies both practical needs and aesthetic desires. As the sun rises, catching the windows of the great house and turning them to gold, you understand that all these monuments, the stone circles and churches, the walls and gardens, the bridges and mills, are part of a continuous tradition of making and marking, of shaping the world to human purpose while respecting its essential nature. This is the particular genius of English culture, This ability to change the landscape profoundly, while making it seem as though it's always been this way. The tradition continues, evolved but recognisable. The stone circles have their echo in modern sculpture parks. The church's role as community centre continues in village halls and community centres. The craft of walling continues wherever stone is available and boundaries need marking. The gardens continue to grow, tended by hands that may use different tools but work with the same patience, the same hope. This is a culture that values continuity over innovation, that finds comfort in tradition, that sees change as something to be absorbed gradually rather than embraced wholesale. It's visible in the way new houses are built to look old, in the way modern farms still follow field boundaries set in Saxon times, in the way ancient footpaths are zealously protected even when they no longer lead anywhere useful. The morning sun has risen fully now, warming the stone and stirring the village into its gentle daily rhythm. As you walk back down from the great house through the awakening settlement, you begin to notice the small movements that signal the start of another day, unchanged in its essentials from countless days before. A door opens and someone steps out to collect milk bottles from the doorstep, their breath visible in the cool morning air. A cat stretches on a sunny windowsill, then settles back into sleep. Smoke rises straight up from chimneys in the still air, each plume marking a hearth where someone is beginning their day with tea and toast. The village baker has been awake for hours already, and as you pass the bakery, the smell of fresh bread draws you in. Through the window, misted with condensation from the warmth within, you can see him at work, his movements economical and practiced, the result of decades spent perfecting the same essential actions. His hands move with a sureness that comes only from deep knowledge, shaping dough with gentle authority, neither forcing nor hesitating. The bakery itself is small, the front shop barely large enough for 3 customers at once, the workspace behind visible through an open doorway. The equipment is a mixture of old and new. A modern electric oven sits beside wooden proving drawers that might be a century old. The scales are mechanical, brass weights worn smooth from handling. The work surface is marble, worn into hollows where generations of bakers have kneaded their dough. You watch as the baker shapes loaves, his hands moving in a rhythm as old as civilization itself. He takes a portion of dough, already risen once, and begins to work it, pushing with the heel of his hand, folding, turning, pushing again. There's no hurry in his movements, no sense that this is work to be gotten through. Each loaf receives the same patient attention, the same careful shaping. He knows that good bread cannot be rushed, that the yeast works on its own schedule, that patience is as important an ingredient as flour or salt. The loaves he's making are traditional, cottage loaves with their distinctive top knot, tin loaves for sandwiches, crusty cobs dusted with flour. Nothing fancy or artisanal in the modern sense, just good, honest bread made the way it's been made here for generations. The recipes are in his head, adjusted daily for temperature and humidity, for the particular qualities of this batch of flour, for the vagaries of the oven that he knows like a familiar friend with its hot spots and cool corners. As he works, customers begin to arrive. Not many, just the regular morning trade. An elderly woman buying her daily loaf, specifying that she wants it well baked, the crust dark and crispy. A mother with children in tow buying rolls for packed lunches and treating each child to a jam donut still warm, sugar cascading onto small fingers. A man in work clothes, picking up sandwiches ordered the night before, thick-cut bread filled with local ham and English mustard. The transactions are unhurried, accompanied by conversation about the weather, inquiries after health and family, comments on village affairs. The baker knows everyone, knows their preferences, remembers who likes their bread sliced and who prefers it whole, who has a standing order for Saturdays, and who only buys when they have visitors. This is commerce at its most personal, where every transaction is also a social interaction, a small reinforcement of community bonds. You leave the bakery with the warm smell of bread still in your nostrils and walk toward the centre of the village. The post office is opening, the postmaster raising blinds and turning the sign on the door from closed to open. Already there's a small queue forming, people posting parcels, buying stamps, collecting pensions, but there's no impatience in the waiting. People chat quietly, catching up on news, sharing observations about gardens and grandchildren. The village shop next door is already busy, the shopkeeper restocking shelves while serving customers, managing both tasks with practiced efficiency. The shop sells everything and nothing. Basic groceries, newspapers, hardware, gifts, sweets in jars behind the counter that must be weighed out in paper bags. It's not convenient in the modern sense, selection is limited, prices higher than in town, but it's here, walkable, staffed by someone who knows your name, who'll order things in specially, who'll deliver to you when you're ill. As the morning progresses toward noon, you find yourself drawn to the canal that runs along the valley bottom, a few minutes' walk from the village. The towpath is well worn, used now by walkers and cyclists rather than the horses that once pulled barges. The canal itself is a marvel of engineering, following the contour line so perfectly that the water barely seems to flow, a ribbon of stillness threading through the landscape. A narrow boat is approaching, moving at walking pace, the slowest form of transport in a world obsessed with speed. The boat is traditionally painted in the old style, roses and castles in bright reds and greens on a background of black and dark blue. Through the windows you glimpse a tiny world of compressed domesticity. Books on shelves, plants on windowsills, a kettle on the stove. The person at the tiller raises a hand in greeting as they pass, and you return the gesture, this simple acknowledgement of shared humanity that costs nothing but means everything. They're not hurrying, couldn't hurry if they wanted to. The canal imposes its own pace, 2 miles an hour at most, slow enough to see every flower on the bankside, every bird in the hedgerow slow enough for thought and contemplation. Behind the first boat comes another, then another, a small convoy of liveaboards or holidaymakers, each boat unique but all sharing the same narrow dimensions, determined by the width of locks built 2 centuries ago. Some boats are immaculate, their paintwork gleaming, their brasswork polished to mirror brightness. Others are more lived in, with bicycles on the roof, solar panels, gardens in pots, the accumulation of a life lived in 70 feet by 7. You follow the towpath to a lock, where the boats must pause in their journey, and here the peculiar democracy of the canal becomes apparent. It doesn't matter if you're on a £1 million wide beam or a rusty old working boat, everyone must wait their turn, everyone must work the locks, everyone must help each other. You watch as boaters work together, winding paddles, pushing gates, sharing knowledge about water levels and lock mechanisms. The lockkeeper's cottage sits beside the lock, its garden running down to the water's edge. Sweet peas climb up canes, runner beans hang heavy on their poles, and the lockkeeper himself, retired now but unable to fully leave his post, tends his vegetables while keeping an eye on the boats, offering advice when needed, sharing stories of the canal's working days when coal and iron, not pleasure seekers, filled the locks. As afternoon arrives, you make your way back to the village and find yourself outside the pub, the Red Lion, or the King's Head, or the Black Swan. The name matters less than the function. The door is propped open, and the sounds of lunchtime drift out. Quiet conversation, the clink of cutlery on plates, occasional laughter. Inside, the atmosphere is warm and welcoming, not forced or manufactured, but genuinely comfortable, like an old armchair that's moulded itself to the shape of its users. The pub is divided into 2 bars. The public bar with its dartboard and fruit machine, its regulars on their usual stools, and the lounge bar, slightly smarter where food is served. But the division is permeable. People move between the 2. Conversations flow across the boundaries. The landlord presides over both, knowing exactly who drinks what, starting to pull pints before orders are placed, maintaining the delicate social balance that makes a good pub work. You find a seat in a corner and observe the lunchtime trade. A group of walkers, maps spread on the table, planning their afternoon route over ploughmen's lunches. Good local cheese, crusty bread from the baker down the road, pickled onions sharp enough to make your eyes water, a dollop of chutney dark and rich with fruit and spice. Their walking boots are muddy, their faces red from morning exertion, their pleasure in simple food and rest palpable. At another table, 2 farmers discuss the weather and its implications for harvest. Their conversation a mixture of old wisdom and modern technology, satellite weather forecasts and traditional signs, the behaviour of cattle, and the feel of wind. Their hands are permanently stained by soil and oil, their faces weathered by decades of outdoor work, but there's a satisfaction in their bearing, the confidence of people who know their worth, who feed the nation, who maintain the landscape everyone loves. At the bar, a regular sits with his pint of bitter, the same beer he's drunk for 40 years, the same seat he's occupied since he was first allowed in pubs. He reads his newspaper with the thoroughness of someone who has time, commenting occasionally on the state of the world to anyone who will listen, receiving agreeable murmurs in response. This is his social life, his connection to the community, as vital to his well-being as food or shelter. The landlord's wife emerges from the kitchen with plates of food, shepherd's pie, its top golden and crispy, steam rising as the first forkful breaks through. Fish and chips, the batter light and crispy, the fish flaking white and perfect inside. Sticky toffee pudding with custard, comfort food that makes no apologies for being exactly what it is. This isn't gastropub cuisine trying to be something it's not, but honest pub food, made with care from decent ingredients, satisfying in a way that transcends mere nutrition. As afternoon settles into a comfortable rhythm, you leave the pub and discover the tea room, tucked away in what might once have been someone's front room, now converted to serve the essential English ritual of afternoon tea. The door rings a small bell as you enter, and you're greeted by the proprietor, a woman who manages to be both welcoming and properly reserved, showing you to a table by the window where lace curtains filter the afternoon light. The room is small, perhaps 6 tables covered with white tablecloths, each set with proper china, not matched sets but accumulated over time, each piece with its own pattern and history. The chairs are various too, some straight-backed, some cushioned, all comfortable in their own way. On the walls hang watercolours of local scenes, painted by local artists, for sale at prices that suggest art as pleasant hobby rather than serious commerce. The menu is simple and unchanging. Tea or coffee, various cakes and scones, light lunches of soup and sandwiches. You order afternoon tea and it arrives in stages, each part with its own ritual and timing. First, the tea itself, in a pot wearing a knitted cosy, accompanied by a strainer, milk jug, sugar bowl with cubes and small tongs. The tea is properly strong, that particular amber colour that speaks of correct brewing time, correct temperature, correct proportion of leaf to water. Then come the scones, warm from the oven, their tops golden, their texture when split revealing the perfect balance of density and lightness. With them, small pots of jam and clotted cream, and immediately you must decide, jam first or cream first. This matters here, though you're not quite sure why, some ancient rivalry between Devon and Cornwall playing out in every cream tea served. The jam is homemade, strawberry perhaps, or raspberry, with whole fruit and that slight sharpness that distinguishes homemade from commercial. The cream is thick enough to hold its shape, rich enough to coat your mouth, the perfect foil to the jam's sweetness. Together with the scone, still warm, they create a combination that seems to justify entirely the reputation of English tea culture. Around you, other customers pursue their own tea rituals. 2 elderly ladies meet as they do every Tuesday, their conversation a gentle stream of local news and family updates, punctuated by comfortable silences. A mother and daughter, perhaps celebrating something or simply maintaining connection, share cake and confidences. A man alone with a book and a pot of tea, reading with the concentration of someone who has nowhere else to be. The atmosphere is one of complete calm, as though the tea room exists in its own temporal bubble, where hurry is not just discouraged but impossible. The clink of china is musical, the murmur of conversation soothing. Outside, life continues at its normal pace, but inside, time moves differently, measured in cups of tea and slices of Victoria sponge. The proprietor moves between tables with practiced grace, refilling teapots, clearing plates, taking orders, all without seeming to hurry. She knows many of her customers by name, remembers their preferences, asks after their families. This is her kingdom, small but perfect. A space she's created where the values she believes in, courtesy, quality, traditions, are maintained against the tide of modern rudeness and rush. As the afternoon wears on, you leave the tea room and walk back toward the canal, drawn by the particular quality of late afternoon light on water. The towpath is busier now, people walking dogs, cyclists passing slowly, joggers maintaining the kind of steady pace that speaks of routine rather than training. Everyone acknowledges everyone else. A nod, a smile, a comment about the weather or the dog or the state of the path. You come upon a lock where several boats are waiting their turn, and the social aspect of canal life becomes even more apparent. Boaters chat while they wait, sharing information about moorings and water points, comparing notes on engines and equipment, telling stories of near misses and lucky escapes. There's no impatience despite the delay, rather a sense that this enforced pause is part of the pleasure, a chance to stop and talk and be human together. A hire boat arrives, its crew clearly inexperienced, approaching the lock too fast, bumping into the side with a thump that makes the more experienced boaters wince. But instead of irritation, there's help. Someone takes their rope, someone else offers advice about lock technique, someone explains the windlass and paddle system. By the time the lock is navigated, the novices have received a practical education in canal craft, and made temporary friends who they'll likely never see again. As evening approaches, you walk through the village once more. The shop is closing, the shopkeeper bringing in the displays from outside, the postmaster counting the day's takings. Children are being called in for tea, their games interrupted but not quite finished, to be resumed tomorrow exactly where they left off. The smell of cooking drifts from windows, roasting meat, baking potatoes, the comfortable smells of evening meals. You pass the village green where a few teenagers sit on benches, not doing much of anything, just being together in that way teenagers have, simultaneously bored and content. Their presence here rather than inside with screens speaks to something persistent in village life, the pull of communal spaces, the need to see and be seen, to be part of something larger than family but smaller than society. The church clock strikes 6, and as if on cue, people begin to converge on the village hall. It's the weekly meeting of something. The gardening club, the history society, the amateur dramatics group. These organisations, run entirely by volunteers, their membership often overlapping, are the skeleton that gives structure to village social life. Through them, people who might otherwise never meet are brought together by shared interests, however specialised or arcane. Inside the hall, chairs are being arranged, tea urns heated, biscuits laid out on plates. The ritual is invariable. The meeting won't start until everyone has tea, the serious business cushioned by social nicety. The speaker tonight, perhaps someone talking about local archaeology or demonstrating flower arranging or showing slides from a recent trip, sets up their equipment with the help of willing hands. The audience gathers, mostly older, mostly retired, but not exclusively so. These are the people who have time for such things, who value knowledge for its own sake, who understand that learning doesn't stop with formal education. They listen attentively, ask pertinent questions, share their own knowledge and experience. This is education as social activity, learning as community building. As darkness falls, you return to the pub, now transformed into its evening incarnation. The lights are dimmer, the fire lit if the season warrants it, the atmosphere more intimate. The after-work crowd has arrived, unwinding with a pint before heading home. The dining tables are full, people enjoying unhurried meals, lingering over coffee and brandy. In the public bar, a different energy prevails. The dartboard is in use, each throw watched and commented upon by an informal audience. The fruit machine flashes and rings, fed with coins by eternal optimists. Conversation is louder, more animated, punctuated by bursts of laughter. This is the pub as social club, as third place between work and home, where hierarchies are flattened, where the doctor and the dustman drink the same beer and argue about the same football team. At a corner table, a group plays dominoes, the click of tiles on wood rhythmic and satisfying. They've been playing together for years, the same game, the same stakes, The same gentle mockery of mistakes and celebration of victories. It's not about the game, really, but about the excuse to gather, to maintain friendships that might otherwise wither, to have something to do with their hands while they talk. The landlord moves between bars, pulling pints, taking food orders, mediating the occasional disagreement with the skill of a diplomat. He knows exactly how much alcohol each regular can handle, when to suggest food, when to call a taxi, when to cut someone off. He's part publican, part social worker, part therapist, maintaining the delicate balance that keeps a pub functioning as community centre rather than mere drinking establishment. Last orders are called at a time that seems arbitrary to outsiders, but makes perfect sense to locals. There's no rush to leave, the English law allowing drinking up time, that civilised pause between last orders and actual closing. Conversations wind down, plans are made for tomorrow, coats are gathered, goodbyes said. The pub empties slowly, reluctantly. People heading home through dark streets lit by occasional street lamps. You follow them out into the night, where the village has settled into its evening quiet. Windows glow with the blue flicker of televisions. Occasionally a figure passes by a lit window, a glimpse of domestic life continuing behind drawn curtains. A cat slinks across the road. A dog barks and is hushed. Someone puts out milk bottles for tomorrow's delivery. This is the rhythm of daily life in England, unchanged in its essentials despite all the surface changes of modern life. The same patterns repeat day after day, week after week, season after season. The baker will rise early tomorrow to make bread. The narrow boats will continue their slow progress along the canal. The pub will open at lunchtime. The tea room will serve its scones. The village hall will host another meeting. There's something deeply comforting in this repetition, this reliability. In a world that seems to change faster and faster, these patterns persist, offering stability, continuity, connection. They remind us that life is not just about achievement and progress, but about maintenance and continuity, about the small, repeated actions that build community and meaning. The people you've observed today are not exceptional, not trying to preserve some museum version of English life. They're simply living as people have always lived here, adapting to change but not being overwhelmed by it, maintaining traditions not from nostalgia but because they work, because they provide structure and meaning to daily life. They shop locally not from ideology but from convenience and connection. They gather in pubs and tea rooms not because they have to but because they want to, because isolation is the enemy of happiness, because community, however you define it, is essential to human well-being. As the day begins its slow surrender to night, you find yourself drawn to the high ground, to the Cotswold Hills where the land rolls away in gentle waves toward a horizon already blurring into dusk. The path you follow is ancient, worn smooth by feet beyond counting, climbing steadily through fields where sheep graze the last sweet grass of the day, their wool golden in the slanting light. You reach the crest of the hill and stop, not from tiredness, but from the simple need to witness what's unfolding before you. The sun has already dropped below the cloud bank that sits on the western horizon, but its light continues to escape, spreading upward and outward, painting the underside of clouds in shades of rose and apricot, copper and gold. The light is soft, filtered through moisture in the air, through the accumulated distance of miles, becoming something gentler than the direct light of noon, something that asks nothing of you but to receive it. Below you the Cotswold Hills spread out in their characteristic pattern of folds and valleys, each one catching the light differently, creating a landscape of subtle gradations from brightness to shadow. The fields are divided by those ancient stone walls and dark hedgerows, creating a patchwork that from this height looks almost abstract, a composition in shades of green and gold, grey and brown, arranged by time and necessity into something beautiful. The villages nestle in the valleys, their stone buildings the same honey colour as the hills themselves, as though they've grown from the earth rather than been built upon it. From this distance you can see the church towers rising above the surrounding roofs, the manor houses with their mullioned windows, the cottage rows with their gardens running down to streams. Smoke rises from chimneys straight up in the still air, and as you watch, lights begin to appear in windows, one by one, small golden squares piercing the gathering dusk. Each light marks a home, a life being lived, someone making tea or drawing curtains or settling in for the evening. You imagine the scenes behind those glowing windows, families gathering for dinner, someone reading by lamplight, an elderly person watching television, children being bathed and put to bed. Each light is a story, separate but connected, individual but part of the greater pattern of human life continuing as it always has, generation after generation in these same valleys, these same stone houses. The quality of the light continues to change minute by minute, almost imperceptible unless you're paying attention. The brightness drains from the sky like water emptying from a bowl, leaving behind colours that seem to come from memory rather than observation. Lavender and pearl, dove grey and the palest rose. The clouds are losing their definition, becoming soft suggestions against a darkening sky, and the first stars are beginning to appear, faint at first, then strengthening as the light fades. A breeze picks up, cool against your face, carrying the scent of evening. Grass and earth, sheep and stone, the complex smell of the countryside settling down for night. The temperature is dropping, you can feel it through your clothes, but it's not unpleasant. Rather a gentle reminder that the day is ending, that rest is approaching, that this moment of perfect balance between light and dark cannot last much longer. You notice how sounds travel differently in the evening air. A dog barking in one of the villages sounds close enough to touch, though it must be miles away. The bleating of sheep echoes against the valley walls. Somewhere, a tractor is working late, its engine sound carrying across the fields. These sounds don't disturb the peace but deepen it, providing a gentle soundtrack to the visual beauty around you. As the light fades further, the landscape begins to simplify, losing its details, becoming shapes and masses rather than particular trees and buildings. The valley fills with shadow first, leaving the hilltops still catching the last light, glowing faintly against the darkening sky. For a few moments you exist in a world divided between light and shadow, between day and night, and the beauty of this transition, this liminal moment, fills you with something like sadness, but softer, more accepting. You understand why this time of day is called the gloaming, that old word that captures something the modern twilight misses, the soft melancholy of endings, the gentle mystery of transformation, the quiet acknowledgement that all beautiful things must fade. But there's comfort here too, in the knowledge that this same scene will play out tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, that this is not an ending but a turning, part of the endless cycle that makes such moments precious rather than tragic. The stars are brighter now, and you can make out the first constellations, the Plough, Orion rising in the east, the same patterns that have guided travellers and marked seasons since humans first looked up and wondered. The lights in the valley villages are fully visible now, clusters of warmth against the dark land, and you feel a sudden wave of affection for those unseen people in their stone cottages, living their quiet lives, keeping the lights burning. With reluctance, you turn from the hilltop and begin to descend, following a path that leads northward toward the Lake District. The journey passes in that strange way that travel in dreams does. You don't remember the actual movement, only the arrival. And suddenly you're there, beside Derwent water as evening settles over the fells, the lake a perfect mirror of polished silver reflecting the fading sky. The water is completely still, not a ripple disturbing its surface. The mountains that surround the lake, Catbell, Skiddaw, the high fells beyond, are reflected so perfectly that it's impossible to tell where reality ends and reflection begins. Sky and water merge into a single element, and the mountains seem to float in infinite space, untethered from earth. You find a large flat rock at the water's edge, and settle yourself upon it, grateful for its solidity in this world of reflections and uncertainty. The stone is cool through your clothes, but not uncomfortably so. It still holds a memory of the day's warmth, giving it back slowly to the cooling air. From here, you can see the full sweep of the lake, its surface darkening from silver to pewter to something deeper, reflecting the changing sky. The sky itself is putting on a performance, clouds catching the last light in shades you didn't know existed. Not just pink, but rose and salmon. Not just grey, but pearl and dove and ash. The colours shift and blend, never quite the same twice, as subtle as watercolours bleeding into each other on wet paper. There's no drama here, no violent sunset, just this gentle fading, this quiet transition from day to night. On the far shore, perhaps a mile away, you can see the lights of a small settlement, Keswick maybe, or Portinscale, their reflections stretching down into the water like golden pathways. A single boat sits at anchor in the middle distance, its reflection perfect below it, and you can't tell if the boat is floating on water or suspended in air. Small islands dot the lake, St. Herbert's Island, Lord's Island, tiny jewels of trees and rock. They're losing their colour now, becoming silhouettes against the reflecting water, but you can still make out the shapes of individual trees, the rocky shorelines. On one island, a single tree stands alone on a small rise, perfectly composed as though planted there by an artist who understood balance and proportion. The silence here is profound but not complete. Water laps gently against the shore with a sound like breathing, a rhythm so slow and steady it seems to come from the earth itself. Somewhere far off, a bird calls, its voice carrying across the water, then silence again. You can hear your own breathing, your own heartbeat, nothing else, as though you've stepped out of time into some quiet space where ordinary rules don't apply. The temperature is dropping more noticeably now, mist beginning to form over the water, wisps of white that float and drift with no apparent purpose. The mist catches what little light remains, glowing faintly, creating shapes that appear and disappear like thoughts too fleeting to catch. Soon the mist will cover the whole lake, will fill the valleys between the fells, creating that famous Lake District scene of islands floating in seas of white fog. You watch the colours drain from the world, everything becoming monochrome, black silhouettes of mountains, grey water, white mist, and above it all a sky fading from blue to indigo to the deep blue-black of night. The stars are multiplying now, more appearing every moment, and their reflections in the still water create a doubled universe. Stars are above and below, infinite depth in both directions. There's a particular quality to this moment, this precise point of balance between day and night, when you can feel the earth turning, feel yourself moving through space on this spinning rock, part of something vast and incomprehensible. Yet at the same time you feel utterly grounded, connected to this specific place, this lake, these mountains, this rock beneath you. The cold is becoming more pronounced, and you know you should move, should seek shelter and warmth, but there's a reluctance to break this spell, to return to the ordinary world of motion and purpose. For a few more moments you remain, watching the last light leave the sky, watching the world transform into night, feeling yourself transform with it. Finally you rise, stiff from sitting, and turn away from the lake. The journey this time is more deliberate, and you find yourself walking through darkness toward the south coast, toward the sea. The transition from lake to ocean, from mountain to beach, happens gradually, the land flattening, the air changing, acquiring a salt tang that speaks of proximity to the sea. You emerge onto a pebbled beach somewhere along the south coast, perhaps near Hastings or Eastbourne, or one of the smaller, nameless coves that dot the shoreline. The beach curves away in both directions, disappearing into darkness, bounded on one side by the sea and on the other by white chalk cliffs that glow faintly in the gathering dark. The English Channel spreads before you, vast and dark, merging with the sky at a horizon you can sense rather than see. The water is quieter than you expected, not the crashing waves of Atlantic coasts but something gentler, waves arriving in sets, building slowly as they approach the shore, then breaking with a sound like long breaths, washing up the beach in a lace of white foam before retreating, pulling pebbles with them in a rattle that's both soothing and melancholy. You begin to walk along the beach, the pebbles shifting under your feet with each step, making walking an effort but a pleasant one, requiring attention and balance. The pebbles are smooth, worn by millennia of wave action into perfect ovals, ranging in size from eggs to fists. In the fading light, you can see their every colour: grey and white, ochre and brown, some banded with stripes, others solid, each one unique, each one shaped by the patient work of water and time. The last light is in the west over the water, a band of pale gold along the horizon fading upward through shades of pink and grey into the deep blue overhead where stars are already bright. The sea reflects this light, creating a pathway of silver gold leading from the shore toward the horizon, toward France invisible in the darkness, toward the vastness of the Atlantic beyond. You stop walking and stand facing the water, feeling the breeze off the channel cool and damp, carrying the complex smell of the sea, salt and seaweed, fish and ocean, the smell of vastness, of spaces too large to comprehend. The waves continue their rhythm, regular as breathing, regular as heartbeat, the oldest rhythm on earth, unchanged since the first seas formed and the moon first pulled at the waters. The sky is fully dark now, the stars brilliant without competing light, the Milky Way visible as a band of light across the sky, countless suns reduced to a soft glow by distance beyond imagining. You've seen stars before, but seeing them reflected in the sea creates a double vision, a sense of floating in space surrounded by light in all directions. A ship passes on the horizon, its lights marking its progress, red and green navigation lights and white lights along its length. You watch it move from right to left, impossibly slow from this distance, and think about all the ships that have passed through these waters. Roman galleys and Viking longships, Norman invasion fleets and Spanish armadas, Nelson's navy and D-Day landings, and now this modern container ship carrying goods from one continent to another, all part of the long history of England's relationship with the sea. The white cliffs loom to your left, ghostly in the darkness, their chalk faces catching and holding what little light remains. These cliffs are England's symbolic boundary, the white walls first glimpsed by returning travellers, the last sight of those departing. They've been painted and photographed, described in countless poems and songs, yet nothing quite captures their presence, the way they mark the edge of land, the point where earth meets water, where England meets the world. You notice how the sound of the waves changes depending on the size of the pebbles they're washing over. In some places the rattle is deep and resonant, in others higher and sharper. The waves themselves vary too. Sometimes a set of larger ones, then a period of smaller, the rhythm complex but somehow right, following rules set by distant storms and the pull of the moon and the shape of the seafloor far below. A coolness touches your cheek, and you realise it's starting to rain, not heavily but in that fine English way, more mist than rain, barely noticeable until you feel your face growing damp. The rain creates circles on the wet sand near the water's edge, each drop a tiny impact visible for a moment before being erased by the next wave. The combination of rain and sea and darkness creates a sense of enclosure despite the vast openness before you. You feel wrapped in the night, held by it, comforted by its darkness rather than threatened. This is England at its most elemental. Water and stone, darkness and stars, the patient work of waves on shore, the slow transformation of rock into sand, the eternal conversation between land and sea. You think about all the people who have stood where you're standing, looking out at this same sea, these same waves, these same stars. Fishermen launching boats at dawn, smugglers landing contraband by night, lovers walking hand in hand, children hunting for shells and sea glass, refugees arriving after dangerous crossings, poets seeking inspiration. The beach holds all these stories, absorbs them, carries them in its pebbles and sand. The rain is increasing slightly, and you know you should seek shelter, but there's something perfect about standing here in the gentle rain, in the darkness, with the sea before you and the land behind. This moment, like the twilight on the hilltop and the stillness by the lake, feels like a gift, something outside of ordinary time, a pause in the endless forward motion of life. You notice lights appearing on the cliff top, houses and hotels, pubs and street lamps, marking the presence of human settlement even here at the edge of things. These lights provide orientation, remind you that shelter is available, that you're not truly alone despite the darkness and the rain and the vast empty sea. The waves continue their eternal rhythm, and you find your breathing synchronizing with them, your heartbeat slowing to match their pace. This is the gift of such places, such moments. They provide a natural meditation, drawing you out of your thoughts and worries, grounding you in simple physical reality, in the feel of rain on skin, the sound of waves on stone, the smell of salt and seaweed. As you stand there, you feel the tensions of the day, the week, the year beginning to drain away, pulled out by the retreating waves, dissolved in the rain, released into the darkness. The landscape has done its work. The journey through England from high moors to quiet villages, from ancient monuments to daily rituals, from hilltop views to lakeside stillness, all of it has been preparation for this moment of complete peace. The darkness is almost total now, only the faint glow of the clifftop lights and the paler line where waves break on shore providing any visual reference. But you don't need to see. Your other senses are heightened. The sound of the sea, the smell of salt air, the feeling of rain and wind on your face, the shifting pebbles beneath your feet, the coolness of the air in your lungs. You realise that this is what you came for, this exact feeling, this sense of being small against the vastness of nature, but connected to it rather than diminished by it. The English landscape in all its gentle beauty has brought you to this point, has prepared you for this moment of complete letting go, this surrender to the darkness and the rain and the eternal rhythm of the sea. Slowly, reluctantly, you turn away from the water and begin to walk back along the beach, toward the lights, toward warmth and shelter. But you carry something of the beach with you, its peace, its rhythm, its ancient wisdom about the value of simply being present, of witnessing beauty without trying to possess it, of finding comfort in the natural world. The rain continues to fall, gentle and persistent. The English rain that feeds the green fields and fills the streams, that nourishes the gardens and cleans the stone, that has shaped this landscape and the people who live in it. You walk through it without hurrying, feeling it on your face, hearing it on the pebbles, grateful for its cool touch. As you leave the beach and climb the path toward the cliff top, you look back one more time at the dark sea, the invisible horizon, the stars reflected in the water. The scene is already fixing itself in your memory, becoming something you'll carry with you, a place you can return to in your mind when you need peace, when you need to remember that the world contains such moments of perfect beauty, such spaces of deep quiet. The lights of the settlement grow closer, their warmth welcoming after the dark and rain. But you know that you've been changed by these twilight encounters, by the Cotswold sunset and the lake at dusk and the rain-washed beach. You've been reminded that beauty doesn't have to be dramatic to be profound, that peace is found in quiet places, that the simple elements, light and water, stone and sky, contain everything necessary for happiness. You find yourself approaching a small stone cottage, tucked into a fold of the hills, its windows glowing with warm golden light that beckons you in from the darkness and the rain. The path to the door is familiar somehow, as though you've walked it 1,000 times before, as though you're coming home after a long journey. The door opens easily at your touch, and warmth flows out to meet you, welcoming you inside. The cottage wraps itself around you like an embrace. You close the door behind you, and immediately the sound of the rain changes, becoming softer, more distant, a gentle pattering on the old slate roof rather than something you're standing in. The wind that you barely noticed outside is now just a whisper around the eaves, a small sound that makes the inside feel even safer, even more protected from the night. The room you've entered is small and low-ceilinged, with thick stone walls that hold the warmth like hands cupped around a candle flame. A fireplace takes up most of one wall, and in it, a fire is burning low, mostly embers now, glowing deep orange and red, pulsing gently as though breathing. The light it gives is soft and flickering, casting moving shadows on the walls, creating a world that feels separate from everything outside, a world reduced to this one room, this one moment, this perfect peace. You move closer to the fire, drawn by its warmth, and settle into a deep armchair positioned to face it. The chair is old, its cushions shaped by years of use into exactly the right configuration for comfort. As you sink into it, you feel your body relaxing, your muscles releasing tension you didn't know you were carrying. The warmth from the fire reaches you, soaking into your damp clothes, into your cool skin, spreading through you like something alive. On the arm of the chair, someone has left a heavy woolen blanket, thick and soft, woven in subtle colours that might be grey or brown or the colour of moorland heather. You lift it and spread it over yourself, and its weight is immediately comforting, grounding you in the chair, anchoring you to this place. The wool still holds a faint scent of lavender, and beneath that the clean smell of air-dried fabric, sun and wind somehow preserved in the weave. The fire settles with a small sound, a log shifting as it turns to ash, and a few sparks drift upward, glowing bright for a moment before fading into darkness. The embers pulse with their own slow rhythm, and you find yourself watching them, mesmerised by their changing patterns, by the way the orange brightens and dims like something breathing, like the heartbeat of the earth itself made visible. The rain on the roof continues its gentle percussion, each drop distinct but part of a larger pattern, creating a sound that is both random and rhythmic, both complex and simple. It's the sound of safety, the sound of being inside while the rain falls outside, the sound that has comforted humans since the first roof was built, since the first shelter was created against the elements. You listen to it and feel yourself sinking deeper into the chair, deeper into relaxation, deeper into the particular peace that comes only at the end of a long day, at the end of a long journey. Your breathing has slowed to match the rain's rhythm, slow and deep, each breath filling your lungs completely before being released in a long, gentle exhale. With each breath, you feel yourself letting go of a little more tension, a little more of the day's concerns, until there's nothing left but this moment, this room, this warmth, this gentle sound of rain, and the soft glow of embers. The cottage holds you in its ancient peace. These walls have stood for centuries, sheltering countless others through countless nights. The stones that form them came from the earth nearby, and they carry in their substance the patience of deep time, the calm of things that have endured. You can feel this patience in the air, this sense that there is no hurry, that time here moves at its own pace, that you can rest as long as you need. Outside, the English countryside stretches away in all directions, invisible now in the darkness but present nonetheless. The hills and valleys you walked through today, the villages with their stone churches and winding lanes, the rivers and streams, the ancient woodlands and open moors, all of it is out there, settling into its own night rhythms. The sheep are bedded down in the lee of stone walls, the cattle standing quiet in their fields. In the villages, lights are being turned off one by one as people make their way to bed. The whole landscape is preparing for sleep, and you are part of this preparation. Through the small window beside the fireplace, you can glimpse the night sky. Clouds have broken apart, and between them, stars are visible, brilliant points of light that seem impossibly distant and impossibly close at the same time. These are the same stars that have watched over England for all of its long history, the same patterns that guided ancient travellers, that marked the changing seasons for farmers, that inspired poets and dreamers. They continue their slow wheel across the sky, patient and eternal, asking nothing of you but to rest beneath them. The fire has burned even lower now, the flames gone entirely, leaving only the deep glow of coals. The light in the room is dimmer, softer, more conducive to sleep. Your eyes grow heavy watching the embers, and you let them close for a moment, then open again, then close. Each time they close, it becomes a little harder to open them, a little more pleasant to keep them shut. The darkness behind your eyelids is warm and welcoming, a darkness that holds no fear, only rest. The woolen blanket has grown warm from your body heat, creating a cocoon of perfect temperature. You adjust it slightly, pulling it higher, and the small movement seems to take great effort, as though you're already half asleep, already moving through that dreamy state where the body grows heavy and movements become slow and imprecise. You settle again, finding an even more comfortable position, one you could maintain for hours without moving. The rain continues, steady and gentle, a lullaby sung by the sky to the sleeping earth. You can hear it in the gutters, running down to the water butt, can hear it on the leaves of the climbing rose outside the window, on the slate path, on the stone walls. Each surface gives the rain a different voice, and together they create a symphony of falling water, the music of English weather, the sound that has accompanied English sleep for millennia. Your mind is growing quiet now, the thoughts that usually rush and tumble slowing down, spacing out, becoming less distinct. You notice them passing like clouds across a sky, but you don't hold on to them, don't follow them. You simply watch them drift by and disappear, leaving behind an increasing emptiness, a peaceful void where before there was constant mental chatter. The cottage breathes around you. Old wood settles with small creaking sounds as it cools in the night. The fire gives one last small sigh as another ember collapses into ash. These sounds don't disturb but deepen the peace, small reminders that you're not alone, that the cottage is here, solid and protecting, that you're safe within its walls. You think of the journey you've taken today, from the high aerial view of rolling green hills to this final resting place. You think of the stone circles and ancient churches, the villages with their bakeries and pubs, the canals with their slow-moving boats, the tea rooms with their scones and proper china. You think of the Lake District fells reflected in still water, of the twilight over the Cotswolds, of the beach with its pebbles and its endless waves. All of it feels like a dream now, beautiful and distant, already fading into the realm of memory. But the feeling of it remains, the sense of having touched something old and peaceful, something that endures beyond the troubles of any individual life. England in its quiet beauty has shared itself with you, has opened its gentle heart, has shown you that peace exists, that beauty persists, that there are still places in the world where time moves slowly and life is measured in seasons rather than seconds. You feel profoundly grateful for this gift, this journey, this moment of perfect rest. The gratitude itself is a warm feeling in your chest, but even this is fading now, being absorbed into the greater peace that's settling over you, like snow falling on a winter field, soft and silent and complete. Your breathing is so slow now, so deep and regular, barely noticeable. Your heartbeat has slowed to match it, a steady rhythm that requires no thought, no effort, that will continue while you sleep, keeping you alive, keeping you connected to the earth and the sky and all living things. You can feel it if you pay attention, this gentle pulse. But even the ability to pay attention is fading, being replaced by a soft, unfocused awareness that asks nothing and expects nothing. The warmth of the fire, the weight of the blanket, the sound of the rain, the darkness of the room, the softness of the chair, all of it combines into a sensation so completely comfortable that you cannot imagine ever wanting to move again. This is where you belong right now, in this moment. This is exactly right. Everything is exactly as it should be. Outside, the deep night of the English countryside continues. In the fields and forests, on the moors and beside the lakes, darkness and quiet reign. The only sounds are natural sounds, the sounds that have always been. The rain, the wind in trees, the call of a night bird, the rustle of some small creature in the undergrowth. The darkness is complete but not empty. It's full of life, full of quiet activity, full of the ancient rhythms that have been repeating since long before humans walked these hills. You are part of this rhythm now, part of this ancient pattern of day and night, waking and sleeping, activity and rest. Your body knows this rhythm in its bones, in its blood, in the very cells that make up your being. You're not fighting it anymore, not resisting. You're simply allowing yourself to be carried by it, like a leaf on a stream, like a cloud in the sky, like rain falling into the ocean. The embers in the fireplace are barely glowing now. the faintest pulse of red in a bed of grey ash. Soon they will go dark completely, and the room will be lit only by starlight through the window, by the faint glow of the night sky. But you won't see this because your eyes are closed now, closed and still, and the darkness you see is the same whether the fire glows or not. Sleep is very close now, so close you can feel it like a presence in the room, patient and kind, waiting for you to stop resisting, to stop trying, to simply let go. And you are ready to let go, ready to release your hold on wakefulness, ready to sink into the deep, softer darkness that promises rest and renewal. The rain is softer now, or perhaps you're just hearing it from farther away, as though you're already beginning to drift into that space between waking and sleeping, where sounds become distant and meaning dissolves into pure sensation. The cottage, the chair, the blanket, even your own body, all of it is becoming less distinct, less important, fading into the background as sleep moves into the foreground. You're so very tired, tired in the best way, the way that comes after a full day, after a long journey, after experiencing beauty and peace. This tiredness is not a burden, but a gift, your body's way of telling you it's time to rest, time to sleep, time to let the day go and surrender to the night. And so you do. You let go. You release your grip on consciousness and feel yourself beginning to drift, to float, to fall very gently into sleep. The transition is so smooth you barely notice it happening. Awareness fading so gradually that there's no clear moment when you cross from waking to sleeping. You simply dissolve into the darkness, into the warmth, into the sound of rain and the deep quiet of the English night. Everything is peaceful now. Everything is safe. Everything is exactly as it should be. You're held by the cottage, by the chair, by the blanket, by the ancient hills outside, by the rain and the stars and the patient turning of the earth. You are part of something larger than yourself, something that has always been and will always be the great cycle of nature that includes within it the simple human need for rest. Sleep now. Let the journey end. Let the day release you. Let the gentle darkness carry you down into dreams, into the deep peace that waits beneath all thought, all worry, all effort. The English countryside sleeps around you, and you sleep with it, cradled in its ancient peace, held in its quiet beauty, safe until morning. Sleep now, sleep deep, sleep well. Let everything go. The rain continues to fall. The stars continue to wheel overhead. The cottage stands solid around you, and you sleep, peaceful and safe, in the heart of England, in the deep night, in perfect rest. Sleep.